Welcome to Jesus Christ Prison Ministry and another video Bible study. Our topic, Deuteronomy chapter 5. Moses summoned all Israel and said, keep in mind, in the Old Testament, we are to place our names, our churches, our denominations, into the place of Israel. They're simply an allegory. They were simply instruments of God that showed the justice of God, his rules to his people of all ages. God is the God of all the world, not just the Israelites. We all are spiritual Israelites if we accept God as our God. Hear, O Israel, or hear, O Christian, the decrees and laws I declare in your hearing today. Learn them and be sure to follow them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. It was not with our fathers that the Lord made this covenant, but with us, with all of us who are alive here today. The Lord spoke to you face to face out of the fire on the mountain. At that time, I stood between the Lord and you to declare to you the word of the Lord, because you were afraid of the fire and did not go up the mountain. The word of the Lord. In John, we read where the Word was made flesh. In other words, the God of the Old Testament who gave the word of the Ten Commandments came as a child called Jesus, not to do away with the law, for God said, Jesus said, I came not to abolish the law. Of course not. He couldn't, because the law is his character written out. No, Jesus came to magnify the law, to glorify it, to fulfill it in his life, and then he tells us, come follow me. He is our example, and we must fulfill the law in our lives. The Israelites were to obey it, to fulfill it in their lives, but they refused and were rejected by God eventually. If you want to go to heaven, you must have heaven's law in your heart. If you break it, you will not be in heaven. And he said, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. God is the God who wants to bring us out of the land of sin. He doesn't want us to be slaveries to sin. Paul tells us that. It is time to break away, to stop sinning, to be perfect, and to keep the Ten Commandments for our eternal life. The whole New Testament teaches that concept. You shall have no other gods before me. No other gods. Not your family, not alcohol, not drugs, not tobacco, not money, your work. Nothing is to come between you and obedience to the Ten Commandments. That's how we show our love to God. Obedience. You shall not make for yourselves an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the fathers to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. How is this played out? It's very simple. If your father or mother sinned, and let's say they were alcoholics, druggies, and so forth, those sins affect the DNA, believe it or not. Modern science is finding out that what we do influences our DNA to the next generation. And so your children will be born with defects, and their children, and so forth. However, if we are obedient to God and stop sinning, our behavior will help to improve, heal the DNA, so that our children and their children can be healthy. That's the way it works. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. How can we misuse God's name? Well, there's one way we can misuse it. We can claim to be Christians while we refuse to be obedient to the 10 Commandments. If you're going to church claiming to be a Christian while you're breaking this 10 Commandments, you're misusing his name. Whatever it is that you're doing that is breaking the 10 Commandments is your God. You're bowing down to it instead of being obedient to God. See how that works? That's why the New Testament tells us, if you've broken one, you've broken them all. No sinner can go to heaven. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, nor your ox or donkey, or any of your animals, nor the alien within your gates, so that your manservant and maidservant may rest as you do. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. As you can see, most of the Christian world today are breaking the 4th commandment. They're not keeping the 7th day Sabbath holy. They're keeping the 1st day holy. If you want to know how it was changed from the 7th day to the 1st day, it wasn't by God. You can go to our videos and read and study and listen and learn how to be educated and to obey God in every way. If you are obeying the world and man's religion of the 1st day, you are breaking the 10 Commandments and will be destroyed. God calls us to remember that day, to keep it holy. Keeping it holy isn't going to church. No. Keeping it holy is to put away all worldly activities on that day. God sanctified the Sabbath and made it holy right in the beginning when he created the world. It was given to all mankind. The whole day is to be kept holy. You are to be holy 7 days a week. You are not to sin 7 days a week. But you are to keep one day holy. And that is so that you can have rest from the world and come apart to God. Spend the whole day with your mind on him. Honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live long and that it may go well with you in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. That's any sexual sins. You shall not steal. Oh, there's so much stealing. Stealing of time, money, stealing of reputation. Think of how many ways you steal or take from people that doesn't belong to you. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not set your desire on your neighbor's house or land, his manservant or maidservant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. It is this 10th commandment that God revealed to the rich young ruler as his problem. He was coveting his wealth that God had given him to give to the poor. For him to be saved, he had to sell everything and become poor and follow Jesus. What sins in your life must you give up for Jesus? These are the commandments the Lord proclaimed in a loud voice to your whole assembly there on the mountain, from out of the fire, the cloud, and the deep darkness. And he added nothing more. Then he wrote them on 2 stone tablets and gave them to me. God wrote the 10 Commandments with his own finger on stone to show the indestructibleness of the 10 Commandments. They can never be done away with. They're in heaven now, says Revelation. When you heard the voice out of the darkness, while the mountain was ablaze with fire, all the leading men of your tribes and your elders came to me, and you said, the Lord our God has shown us his glory and his majesty, and we have heard his voice from the fire. Today we have seen that a man can live even if God speaks with him. But now, why should we die? A little bit of unfaith there. This great fire will consume us, and we will die if we hear the voice of the Lord our God any longer. How often we run from God when he's drawing us to him. Don't be afraid. Obey him. Draw close to him. For what mortal man has ever heard the voice of the living God speaking out of the fire as we have and survived? Go near and listen to all that the Lord our God says. Then tell us whatever the Lord our God tells you. We will listen and obey. How many of us claim we will obey God? We go to church, but nowhere in the Bible does God command us to go to church. Interesting, isn't it? But he does command us to keep the 10 Commandments. And yet, how many churches refuse to teach us and to tell us how to keep the 10 Commandments? The Lord heard you when you spoke to me, and the Lord said to me, I have heard what this people said to you. Everything they say was good. Oh, that their hearts would be inclined to fear me and keep all my commands always, so that it might go well with them and their children forever. If they had kept the commandments, when Jesus came, they would have been elevated in all the world to be the best nation in the world. But they rejected the 10 Commandments and they crucified an innocent person. In other words, they committed murder. Go tell them to return to their tents. But you stay here with me so that I may give you all the commands, decrees, and laws you are to teach them to follow in the land I am giving them to possess. If you want to get to heaven, the land that God possesses, you have to live by the rules of that land. And those rules are the 10 Commandments. So be careful to do what the Lord your God has commanded you. Do not turn aside to the right or to the left. When God says do not commit adultery, don't be committing sexual sins. When God says don't lie, don't lie. When God says keep the seventh day, Saturday, Sabbath, holy, keep it holy. Don't turn to the right or the left. Don't keep Friday. Don't keep Sunday. Keep in mind, God's days start when the sun sets. So God's Sabbath we keep from Friday sundown until Saturday sundown. Walk in all the way that the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live and prosper and prolong your days in the land that you will possess. Walk in all the way of the Lord. And when Jesus came, he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus Christ, who wrote the 10 Commandments with his own finger, went through the birth process and lived them to show us how to keep them. He didn't break them. If he broke them, that means he would have been a sinner. If he sinned, he could not be our Savior. The only way Jesus could save us, was by keeping the 10 Commandments perfectly, as he says. He says, who of you can accuse me of sin? Not one. And then he calls us to follow him. Follow his example. Jesus said in John 14:15, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. Those commandments that he wrote with his own finger. Let us follow the example of Jesus today. Let us keep his commandments in our hearts as Jesus did. Let us obey them and not reject them as the Jews did and were lost. Thank you for joining me and Jesus Christ for another video Bible study.